All right, welcome to your first set of video notes for U.S. History in Ms. Richardson's class. These are notes 1.2, Immigration and Nativism. So 1.1 we did in class, that was the industrialization and urbanization. So now we're going to focus on, like I said, immigration and nativism and how those looked at the beginning of the Progressive Era. So immigration leads us to this idea that America is a melting pot. This is a really popular term today, and it's been around since really pre-1908, but in 1908 there was a play, this is the cover for it, called The Melting Pot, and that popularized the term. So you've got two questions I want you to answer, and you can pause on here so you can see them while you think about it. So write your answers down. Do you think America was a melting pot in the early 1900s? And why do you think that? And do you think America is a melting pot today? Why do you think that? And these don't have to be complete sentences or anything like that. Just write down your ideas and your thoughts before you go on to the next slide. Keep those answers, we'll come back to those. Throughout Unit 1, especially Part 1 of Unit 1, we're going to be talking a lot about this idea called people on the margins. And these are groups who don't fit the typical American stereotype and are kind of separated from the rest of American society. We're also going to use the term disenfranchised groups. So people who are separated out from mainstream American society. These include immigrants, which we're going to talk about today, the urban poor, which we've already talked about in class a lot, and we're going to continue to do that, women and African Americans, as well as some other minorities. So just know that we will talk about all of these throughout Part 1. So as we start talking about immigrants, we first need to talk about some of the changes that were happening in the late 1800s, early 1900s with immigrants. We've always had immigrants. We are a nation of immigrants. Unless you're a Native American, your ancestors are an immigrant. But what started happening is we had this idea of the old immigrants, who were people from England, and they spoke English, they had the same kind of history, similar languages, similar religions. And then we had this idea of the new immigrants, and the new immigrants were different. And those were the ones that we decided we didn't like in America at the time. So these new immigrants, a lot of them from Southern Europe and Eastern Europe, they looked different, they spoke differently, they dressed differently, they had different religions, different alphabets even from what we were used to. And we also had a lot of Asian immigrants in the West Coast at the time, coming in through Angel Island to work on the railroads. So you have these very, very different groups of immigrants, and they're changing the way America looks. One of the ways, the way America looks is changing so much, this whole melting pot idea, if we kind of keep with that in mind, is that not only are these immigrants coming to the U.S. and settling and finding new homes and jobs, once they're settled and their lives are better than they were in their previous location, their previous homeland, they are bringing other immigrants, their friends and family here as well. So we have this huge influx of immigration at the time because of that. That whole idea is called chain migration. So chain migration is, it's not just that I am going to move to the U.S., I am going to move to the U.S., and then I'm going to have my family, my friends, other people that I know. Sometimes it's even not people you know, but family friends or a friend of a friend, but you are their contact in America, and they come and they live near you and they create this community with you, so they don't need to learn to be American, as we sometimes call it. So you can see there's this huge increase in immigration in the early 1900s, and this is going to lead to some other issues. There are also some reasons for this huge increase besides just chain migration. So we talked before about all this new technology that was coming out in the 1800s, late 1800s especially, mid to late 1800s, early 1900s, and some of those, things like the railroads and steamships, are going to increase our immigration. Railroads are going to make it, they're going to connect the U.S. from coast to coast. Much quicker and faster to transport goods and people, cheaper, and you need labor for this. This actually is a large part of our Asian immigration in the West. The Asian immigrants come to work on the railroads. So a lot of our Chinese immigration San Francisco area and places like that, they were railroad workers, and that's why they came in. So you can see on the map that we have the entire U.S. covered with railroads. So it's really easy once you get to the U.S. to go somewhere else. Getting to the U.S. is even easier as well because we have steamships. Faster, cheaper, easier travel. So everyone can afford this, or most everyone. People will save up and they'll do that, and they will come to the U.S. They can land in, say, New York Harbor, come through Ellis Island, and then they can go out to Chicago, to San Francisco, to Detroit, to all these other places where they know people and start their lives. And these immigrants are going to start their lives in these places, these ethnic neighborhoods, near where they know people. So we end up with all these ethnic neighborhoods. This is a map of Cleveland's ethnic neighborhoods. We have them in all the major cities, and they actually still, we have them and we give them names. Things like Little Italy, Chinatown, Greek Town. I mean, we know about these places. They still exist today. They started as ethnic neighborhoods. We also call them ghettos. Not the kind of ghetto like you think of, but a ghetto is just a term for an ethnic neighborhood. It changed in World War II because Hitler changed it. But for our purposes, a ghetto is an ethnic neighborhood. And you moved to these ethnic neighborhoods where you felt comfortable, where you were around other people who spoke the same language as you, practiced the same religion as you, be it Catholicism or an Orthodox religion like a Greek Orthodox, something like that, whether they were Jewish, maybe it was about the way they dressed. It could also be about political beliefs and things like that. So your traditions, your religion, your political beliefs, all of those are going to be preserved because you're living in a neighborhood with other people who share those. Now, this also becomes a problem because at the same time that you're having very happy preserving your traditions, we also have these ethnic neighborhoods that come together. For example, in this is 5 Points in New York City. It's an artist rendition where we had different ethnic groups that basically became gangs and would fight over control of different areas, of political control, and it really became problematic at times. So this is another problem that we see, and it's going to lead to the rise of this new idea called Nativism. So Nativism is the rise in anti-immigrant sentiment in the U.S. during this time period. A nativist is a person who does not support, does not want these new immigrants coming into the U.S. And you can see by some of these pictures how that is showing up. This is all based on prejudice about the issues with the different languages, the different clothing, different religions and traditions, but also because these immigrants are often unskilled workers. They're coming from being farmers. We have our own American farmers moving into cities as well, and they're taking jobs for very little pay that other Americans want. So low pay, low wages, they're willing to work for less money because in their homeland, it seemed like more money. So in their homeland, everyone was so poor that less money didn't matter as much. So they're competing for jobs, they're working as scabs and union busting. So when workers go on strike, they're actually undermining those strikes and hurting the workers. And they'll join unions later after they have a job, but they're hurting them when they don't. Another reason that nativists are prejudiced against these new immigrants is some of these ideas that they brought with them. There are some new, more radical political ideas. Some of these Eastern and Southern European countries are bringing ideas like socialism, communism, and Marxism, anarchism into the U.S. Socialism probably gets the most support out of all these ideas, and that's going to undermine capitalism because it's about the government controlling business rather than individuals controlling business. So that whole idea that you can work hard and get ahead in America is undermined by socialism. So that's also going to create prejudice from American workers towards these immigrants. And then we've got corruption. They're adding to corruption in the cities, they're adding to the problems in the cities because they don't know better. So political bosses are using them, are taking advantage of them, cheating them, bribing them, and these immigrants, these new immigrants, don't know any better. They don't know that that's not okay, and so they go along with what the political bosses tell them is okay, which ends up hurting the workers and the Americans who are already here. So all of these prejudices lead to a rise in nativism, that anti-immigrant sentiment, and the nativists really push to keep America for the Native Americans, which is really the old immigrants and people who have descended from them. So Western Europe, Northern European immigrants who speak English and act like they do. So they don't want the new immigrants in. One of the main ways they try to do this is through restriction. That's their plan to fix the problems they see as immigrants causing. This isn't a really successful way of restricting it, but they want to keep out particularly those people from Asia, Southern Europe, like Greece or Italy, Eastern Europe, like from the Balkan regions. They want to keep those people out of the U.S. One of the ways they are successful is through the Chinese Exclusion Act, which happened in 1882. But outside of that, there's not a lot of success with restriction policies. What we do see happen more than restriction policies, and ends up being a little bit more popular, is this idea of assimilation, which is, instead of keeping these immigrants out, these new immigrants out, actually teaching them to be American and how to act the way we want them to. There's not necessarily a lot of success with it, but this is really popular with Americans during the time period, and we see a lot of progressives who start to push for assimilation during this same time. So now that we've gone through all the notes and you've looked at immigration and nativism in the late 1800s, early 1900s, go back to those answers you wrote down at the very beginning for those two questions about the melting pot. Are your answers still the same? Why did they stay the same, or why did they change? So think about that and be ready to talk about it in class tomorrow or next week. But be ready to have those ideas in class because we will bring those up. So I will see you in class tomorrow.